Buonasera a tutti e grazie per essere intervenuti a questo appuntamento che è l'ultimo del lungo Focus Cina che abbiamo organizzato quest'anno alla Biennale. Grazie.
Hello and welcome to this special event, which is also supported by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. These have been two very intense days, especially in this biennial. Nevertheless, we have managed to comply with all the appointments that we had set up. And we are now about to open the trilateral event where Italy is a bridge between China and the United States for audiovisual collaborations. In these days, they've managed to count with the direct support of I apologize, I got his name, Maio Di Stefano, who has followed up and really taken care of all the panels. Looking at him heroically on his there were numerous meetings that were being held, and that encouraged, while we were at home, he continued to work, and that encouraged us to organize the Focus China, which was made in a hybrid form. It is very interesting that we have managed to blend the physical presence of people with the distance format. And we are now connected with friends from United States, Los Angeles, Washington, China, and I can see Mr. Li Chung was also connected. I know that for some of you it's early in the morning, for others it's late in the evening, so I thank you all for being here. At this point, I would like to thank those who have supported us. Anna Laura Enrico in particular, who is supporting us, and who has been supporting us for some time now. And I am pleased to invite you to this event. So having said as much, I would like to welcome you to the second edition of the meeting between Europe, United States and China. It is now the time of the speech by Mr. Maio Di Stefano. Good afternoon, good morning to those who are at the other side of the ocean. Today there are a lot of different time zones sat around the table, and this shows the importance which is attached to this event and to this type of diplomacy which has been called cultural diplomacy, which involves the cinema, but of course all the other arts and other forms of culture. I can only thank the Biennale, the organizers, Roberto Stabile, representing ANICA, and I would like to also add my voice to a consideration which has just been made. It is such an important message that this festival is taking place like every year, despite the hybrid context, and despite the fewer people attending, because this shows us that our future is made up of relationships focusing on cinema, audiovisual, and cultural relationships, where Italy does have a lot to say. Please allow me also to very quickly digress and say how important it is from the point of view of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, how important this type of event is, putting around the table Italy, representing Europe, the United States and China, is essential. It is very difficult in other areas to do this, but culture is a world of bridges. It's a world made of dialogue. It's a world where really we can come together and collaborate fully to achieve a joint end result, which is to further the knowledge of different people who enjoy the products which are being made here, and who, thanks to these products, can increase their knowledge, their skills, their understanding of other peoples. It has been a strong desire that to give a thrust to the world of cinema. This mirrors how much the world has slowed down due to COVID, cinema is a world of aggregation and has therefore been very strongly affected by this disease. If I think of the reforms that have been done by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I know that others will be talking about the work done by the Ministry of Cultural Affairs in addition to those that have been implemented by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also include action for the audiovisual world for 1.8 billion euros, which do not simply aim at compensating losses, but really do look towards the future and have the intention of helping the companies working in this sector to really rise to the challenges by looking for challenges, rising to the challenges by looking for partnerships, also on the other side of the world. So we have to work with the world of the producers, of the authors, in order to make products that are increasingly international in nature and that are originated as such. And the reason for this is that if we think of the direct competences that lead me to be here today, that is the support to internationalization and support to companies, if you want to see the cinema as an asset amongst the many assets available for the companies in a country, it is because we believe that cinema, culture and the audiovisual sector, we can better tell the story of our country, allow people to get to know it better, and therefore also increase trade, exchanges, tourism, and establish those bridges which I was talking of at the beginning that enrich Italy, not only from an economic standpoint, but also as regards its international standing amongst the main players that are represented here today. One thing that COVID has taught us, and this relates to today's event, is that the digital is not just a backup tool, but it is something that is becoming increasingly important. Hybrid tools will become increasingly important. And just to give you some figures, the hearings that Roberto was talking about earlier, and I had to smile because I was on my own in the conference hall. It is a conference hall that holds up to 800 people, and I was there on my own. But those conferences allowed me to talk simultaneously with 3,500 business people for each session, something which would have been unachievable otherwise without using digital means. I think that this is an excellent message because if we can find the right tools to hybridize our traditional ways of working, we can broaden the interlocutors that will therefore benefit more from our initiatives. The aim is to promote new tools from trade fairs focusing on products, but also branching out to the audiovisual sector, which is at the core of a market of products. And for this reason, we have thought of the extension of the physical trade fair to the digital level, using also in artificial intelligence with a new portal called export.gov.it that integrates a blockchain and other tools and the opportunities for companies to talk with each other and to get to know markets directly in real time by using the best tools available that the international markets make available. We have the United States here. There is Google. Are other providers that supply a lot of different options that are to be explored. And then on the side of the producers and the authors, achieving contact with the other segments of the market. Using the greatest social media, we are now able to reach the youngsters, a part of the population that is very often very difficult to get hold of when we talk of initiatives made by the public institutions. Therefore, we are able to set up customized tools that really are available for all. In Italy, the government is doing a lot. I'm thinking of the Innovation Fund, which has been established in addition to the funds for the development of innovative startups that more than ever can establish dialogues with the youngsters. All of this includes and requires international cooperation. And we're thinking, for example, of Erasmus Startup, which has the aim of enabling our startups to get to know the world that there is in other places through internationalization. And I'm talking also of startups in the world of cinema and the audiovisual. This is something that we are doing, working very carefully and closely amongst the different ministries. I'm very proud of what we are doing. We have several projects on the table. We are sponsoring them as Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But to cut all of this short, we have a network of more than 300 institutions, including the Institutes for Culture and the consular services that enable us to promote Italian products, also through events with integrated promotion activities that are promoted throughout the consular network at the same time. They enable us to get to know what is happening in Italy in the audiovisual world with an institutional within an institutional framework that can raise the attention towards these events. And then we have several events where we provide our support from all different points of view, from the economic support required to the support required in festivals in Italy and abroad, to the authors and producers, so all those involved in the cinema making. There are more than 200 of such activities performed. Two-thirds of these the films that have been showcased were Italian. In addition, we wanted to really give a thrust to and encourage what is being called integrated promotion. This has been achieved also through the most recent decrees implemented in COVID, the times of COVID. 60 million euros for campaigns like the Cinema Week, which lead us to innovatively think of how we can make sure that the products that are established here do find in fact space in the largest platforms, the consumer platforms, on digital platforms. We all know Amazon, Netflix, but there are lots of others worldwide. So it has been very useful to be here in Venice, to be able to talk with such a broad number of spectators. We have all the knowledge required, and for this reason, I would like to really ask you to provide us with your considerations in order to achieve our target, to really go beyond the national borders. So in order for the companies to be the smaller startups to be able to really start working. For this reason, we have all the interest of supporting the sector and guide it somehow. So trying to understand together what is the direction that we want to go into. You know, sometimes it's a bit like an hamster in the wheel. I can only see part of the world. But if we come together, then perhaps we will find a better direction for all of us. Drawing to a conclusion, I would simply like to thank you once more, because all the things that we have been doing over the last few days is the result of a clear will, the clear desire to overcome the obstacle and to achieve a result nevertheless. I hope and I'm sure that we will meet again next year in a crowded Lido. But it has been nevertheless good to be here and to talk about the growing numbers of what we can do on a global level. I would like once more to thank our friends who have connected from China and the United States. There are lots of opportunities for collaboration, both in terms of co-productions and considering Italy as a place for international co-productions. I know that we are lucky to have a country that really has a bit of everything. We have cities, we have countryside, we have small villages. Really, we have a lot of very interesting locations. At this point, I think I have to give the floor to the Undersecretary. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here today. I would like to welcome all those who are listening to us. I would like to congratulate ANICA, who, together with MIBACT, has organized this event for the second consecutive year. I would, however, also like to congratulate the entire team of the Biennale, from the President Cicotto to the Director Barbera, to the last of the co-workers of Biennale, for having managed to achieve, to organize the 77th edition of the Mostra del Cinema di Venezia of the Venice Film Festival in such a dramatic year after months of uncertainty. The pandemic caused by COVID-19 has forced us to face an enormous health emergency, which has had a terrible effect on our everyday lives and on all the sectors of production, including the cinematography chain of value, which has been very much affected by this trauma. The organization of the film festival is an important sign in this complex situation. It is a great challenge for all of us. The work that has been performed has been incredible despite the great uncertainty, and it has been also achieved by overcoming a lot of difficulties. It is very important to highlight that the signal which is being launched by this film festival, which is performed in presence, really is important. Venice has succeeded, just as the Gifoni Festival has succeeded. These have been the first festivals that were held in presence after the pandemic, and they testify to the fact that through culture, Italy can relaunch its post-pandemic period by overcoming great difficulties in order to support and promote cinema. To bear witness to the importance of this event, ANIC, in collaboration with Biennale di Venezia, with Rai Gold and Rai Movie, has decided to contemporarily broadcast the inauguration and the projection of the opening film Lacci by Daniele Lucchetti in several cinemas throughout the national territory. This is another important sign of synergy and solidarity amongst the different segments of this very important industry, which is the cinematographical industry. It is very important to be here. It is very important to have the opportunity to grasp the chance to discuss the pandemic, the post-pandemic age, to really overcome this major economic crisis, which unfortunately has flanked the health emergency. It has been a sudden storm which affected the industry in a very favorable moment in time. In 2019, the international entertainment market had, for the very first time, exceeded $100 billion, having increased 8% against 2018. It is a particularly important trend for Italy, where in 2019 we achieved an increase in revenue of 14.35%. Before the pandemic, the entire cinematographic industry, the entire value chain from producers, distributors, the producers, for example, of devices, generated 4 billion euros in turnover, with over 2,000 companies working. The segment was therefore strongly developing when the emergency started in February, with very serious repercussions on the economy and the workers. And the recovery after first reopenings has turned out to be very difficult, especially considering the legitimate fears of spectators of going back into the cinemas and the very strict protocols that we have necessarily had to adopt. The Italian government has tried to provide an immediate and effective solution to the difficulties affecting this segment, from the Cura Italia decree to the last decree that was issued in August. We made available to the cinematographical industry 335 million euros, a very important and major fund which is enabling the companies working in the segment to compensate for the losses. We also have a decree for 100 million euros to support the cinema and the audiovisual segment, as envisaged by the 2016 cinema law, we have approved a decree for 40 million euros to support the theatres, which is a compensation of 10,000 euros for each theatre and something more depending on the difference, the percentage decrease in turnover compared to the previous years. In addition to that, we have supported the projection of films, the screening of films in open-air cinemas and open-air arenas. We have derogated the regulations on the first screening, the release of films, in order to allow them to be streamed. From the 15th of June, we have also reopened the theatres. We have worked together with all the ministries involved and, of course, with the field associations to establish a shared protocol in order to reopen sets safely. We have very much appreciated the solidarity shown by the great players of this world vis-à-vis all those people, all the professional workers who work in this segment. Netflix and the Italian Film Commission, for example, work together for establishment of a fund for the support of TV and cinema for the COVID-19 emergency in order to support the workers in this industry. We have also introduced greater flexibility to access the resources allocated for tax credits. We have introduced the exemption of some taxes for cinemas. As regards the workers who were forced to stay at home because of the pandemics, we have a very important a major bonus. And the bonuses were also extended to those working in the entertainment segment. In the coming days, we will also promote a decree for the tax credits on distribution. There will soon be another one for technical industries, which are equally important for the value chain. All these measures have enabled us to face the emergency. It is clear that we must do more because there's the very difficult role. We have the difficult role now of relaunching this industry, although the pandemic has not yet finished, unfortunately. Yet Italy has risen to the challenge, and the encouraging signs are there because we are one of the countries that have been best able to face the pandemic. We have done a lot. We have made every effort to overcome the pandemic, and we are now trying to support recovery as far as we can. Major support can also be supplied by our American friends who might decide to distribute their films in our cinemas despite the difficulties at the moment without waiting for the US markets like Warner Bros. Has done with Tenet by Christopher Nolan. It would be a good way for us to help the theatres in Italy which are opening up and want to attract spectators. However, the recovery and the reopening shows us that it is important for there to be further and greater coordination and integration amongst the players in Europe. Europe can have a very important role in promoting incisive strategies within this sector, not only because Europe is one of the most important areas for production, but also for the enjoyment of cultural assets. So culture must be at the center of the new European policies. We need to make very brave choices affecting innovation, training, talent, the ability to grasp the extraordinary opportunity which is being offered to us by the digital revolution. We need resources to support all of this. Financial support will be of the essence. As a result, the Next Generation EU plan is an enormous opportunity to invest even more in culture and to make sure that culture is the hub around which the European economic and social policies can be designed to ensure their incisiveness and that they do indeed respond to the identity of Europe and the European Union. My hope, therefore, is that recovery will also start from here, from the Venice Film Festival, one of the most important areas where films are showcased, a place where it is possible to exchange ideas and which can really accelerate the recovery. But in order for us to get back to what we consider normal. Today, we are launching a double sign here in Venice. We are inviting you to come and produce in Italy, where we have excellent facilities, top quality professionals and skills. Here, we can make cinema at very high quality levels. And on this, I would like to quote the work that we are doing in order to make sure that the access to cultural assets by cinema productions is increasingly easy. Training on managerial issues, entrepreneurial issues, has to be back at the forefront. It is important for there to be a very important coordination role played by the government and the ministry vis-à-vis the film commissions, which are also another important tool to promote the cinema and to attract investments. I do hope that very soon we will be able to leave this period, this pandemic, behind us. In the meantime, here we can, in Italy, we can film using all the precautions necessary to work safely. My idea of cinema is global because Italian cinema has to learn to be global at the same time, enhance its identity, its cultural identity, the elements which characterize it while looking at the same time all the rest of the world by developing the ability to tell the story of our specific identity, of specific cultural identity on the international level. Today, thanks to the TV series, we can see products made in faraway countries. A story which has been written in Lithuania has to be understood in Beijing. That's what globalization is all about. But we can't forget the local level, because otherwise we will leave our souls behind. That is why I'm talking about the global level, where the global and the local level enhance each other reciprocally. The success of Perfetti Sconosciuti in China, despite the problems encountered in distributing the film in the theaters, does testify to what I am saying. This film by Paolo Genovese was released in just over 4,000 copies, which is very small if you think of the dimensions of China. Immediately ranked fifth in amongst the most seen films. This has encouraged the Chinese buyers to be increasingly interested in Italian films. The result is that today there are numerous titles in Chinese platforms and TVs, with a considerable increase during the lockdown. Drawing to a conclusion, I would like to say that I am aware that we can and must do more. However, I think that we are on the right path. We are inspired by a bottom-up strategy, talking with all the stakeholders in the industry, and this is the most successful model. We will continue to prove it in this very important stage when we are relaunching our economy. Thank you, and fruitful proceedings.
Thank you both, Vice Secretaries, for their contributions, for giving evidence of the proximity of the government, not only to the Italian industry, but to all the friends who are following us from Los Angeles, Beijing, and who are connected with us. Thanks a lot. It is now time to speak with the industry. I invite President Rutelli to join me here on stage, whereas Mr. Leone will join us in video connection. The floor to Francesco Rutelli, President of ANICA.
Los Angeles, Beijing, benvenuti a Venezia. we are in Venice, and it was somehow a brave decision, but at the very end, I think it was a responsible decision. And by now, it has been a very successful event, and I would like to thank our friends from overseas for attending this meeting. ANICA and Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been so keen and determined in order to maintain these meetings, and also an opportunity to cooperate. So we had very vibrant, interesting meetings, notwithstanding this difficult moment we are living all over the world. Questo detto, passo a delle brevi osservazioni di amicizia e di fiducia.
A few remarks to give a follow-up to the remarks already made by Vice Secretary Di Stefano and Vice Secretary for MIBACT, Navarro Rico. Allow me to say a couple of things. First, after this lockdown, we have a production chain which is even more integrated, if possible. A few figures. One, referring to cinema theaters today, and an evaluation on the substance and the prospects. Since the cinema theaters reopened on August the 19th, the number of spectators, as against 1 year ago, was quite satisfactory. Last year, Italy was the European market with the highest rate of growth for cinema theaters. And the same was true for January and February 2020. From August 19th to date, the theaters have lost 79% of their spectators. But the number of people who went to cinema theaters is extremely important. We have had more than 1,300,000 Italians who went to a theater from August 19th to date. If you consider that football is not opening up to spectators, no concert is allowed yet, the fact that in just 2 weeks, more than 1,300,000 Italians have entered a cinema theater is a clear indication that the message sent from Venice as well is successful. That is to say, cinema is a safe place thanks to precautionary measures, thanks to the collaboration of the spectators themselves. And the second aspect refers to the market. During the lockdown, we have all become hungry for video content, and we have done and we have exploited them in all possible ways through our TVs, with smart TVs, on our smartphones, on our computers, portable computers, exploiting the possibilities offered by the different platforms. And this brings us back to the crucial issue that is an integrated production chain should include products turning to a public that is more attentive than before. We have hundreds of millions of people all over the world who have been watching documentaries they hadn't watched before. They have integrated digital experiences with animation, TV series, movies, very new or historic movies, in an unprecedented kind of fruition. The public is asking for content, and we must provide content, adequate content. The Italian industry is trying to make its products even more international, if possible, and this is true for all audiovisual productions. Allow me to say that in Italy, we were among the first to open our shooting sets. We were working on sets while cinema theaters were still closed, because we had signed agreements involving the whole production chain, crews, technical staff, productions, producers. A great effort starting from ANICA, APA, the different associations involved with cinema production. Well, we made it possible to go back on set. We had a final blessing by the Ministry of Labor. So we restarted shooting in total safety. Workers, technical staff, crews, our actors and talents, the whole of the productive sector is now working at full regime with very high costs, clearly, but with the sense of responsibility for being part of this restarting. One last remark for the public sector. I am turning to the government and to its representatives. RAI should increase its investments in production. The budget difficulties RAI is experiencing, as other stakeholders, should receive a special attention here at the Venice Film Festival. We see many contributions by RAI in many sectors, and these contributions by RAI, that is producing, co-producing, distributing, we will say something about virtual reality with RAI Cinema, are extremely important and require the necessary support by the government to make RAI a protagonist together with other broadcasters, RAI, Mediaset, and other broadcasters. Not to mention the new reality of the platforms, Netflix first. It has become a member of ANICA. It has transparently decided to be part of a production chain. So my conclusion is, let us look at 2021. Let us devise the tools that can guarantee that, thanks to the support of the relevant ministries, providing access to European funding. There are 2 or 3 funds that should aim at closing this dramatic period of time to reach the year 2021 with a new recovery, not with an abyss in terms of results for the whole system. Let us try and work for the next year, and let us all meet at MIA. We are working at it together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the Ministry of Economic Development, with the Ministry for the Cultural Heritage and Activities. And so, as Venice is the first international film festival in person after the terrible months of lockdown, so the audiovisual market meeting will be the first in Europe. We hope we will have the full commitment of all the businesses involved, and we want this appointment to mark a new step forward in terms of international co-productions, attraction of investments. So to our friends in the US and in China, who are an important part of our collaboration with MPA, and in the case of China, with a world that is starting to develop and that should rely on collaboration to reach important results, well, we send them a message of hope. Culture and creative industries, and the creative industries are among the major instruments to increase employment, to send positive messages to a world that is afraid and full of uncertainties. The audiovisual sector, cinema, moving images in general, have given a relief to the population. But we can also say that the audiovisual world has opened up our horizon, avoiding closing on ourselves. So long live the Venice Film Festival and the recovery of our creative sectors.
Grazie Presidente per il contributo.
Thank you, President, for your contribution. Allow me to add that MIA is organized by ANICA and APA, and we have Giancarlo Leone, the President of APA, the Association of Audiovisual Producers. Sorry for not being there with you. Thanks to the digital tools, we can communicate at a global level. Recently, a few days ago, the new report by PricewaterhouseCoopers was published on cinema, audiovisual, entertainment industry was published. Their estimates mention year 2020 that should see a reduction to $15 billion for the overall market, with a reduction by 66%, whereas the streaming fruition by the main platforms should reach $60 billion, with a growth by 30%. I really hope that these figures that might be not true can be denied very soon. I really hope that the audiovisual industry will continue to strengthen. I really hope that soon the physical industry, that is to say the traditional places where we normally enjoy certain products, thinking of cinema theaters, can grow again in their results, as President Rutelli was mentioning. After saying this, I must say that the opening from the 14th to the 18th of October of the International Audiovisual Market in Rome, MIA, but also online with a dedicated platform, MIA, International Audiovisual Market, is a joint venture between ANICA and APA, but it is also supported by the fundamental contribution of the Institute for Foreign Trade, ICE. Everything started a few years ago thanks to the Ministry for the Economic Development, MISE, with the contribution of MIBACT, the Ministry for the Cultural Heritage and Activities. The opening up of this international market might be a fundamental contribution for the restarting of the market. All productions are starting slowly, but they are starting with additional costs all over the world. I must recognize that the government and the Ministry for the Cultural Heritage and Activities has managed to find additional resources, economic resources, to allocate for tax credit, which is one of the major tools in favor of the cinema industry. They have managed to adopt a tax credit with increased rates, and we hope that the recovery, the restarting, will continue in 2021. Next year, we will still have to work with the with health limitations. We are aware of the fact that this pandemic will not be easily overcome. So it is fundamental for Italy, but I think for all countries, to have by the national governments the necessary support, an extraordinary effort, as was the case for 2020. If this does not happen, we will have to face a recession of a terrible seriousness. Finally, I have to recall, as President Rutelli has just said, I have to repeat what I said in front of President Conte and Prime Minister Conte and to the Minister Dario Franceschini. RAI is the public service, TV service in Italy, and it is the flywheel, the main engine for investments in audiovisual and cinema. RAI is not only paid by the fees of the citizens, it is also paid thanks to the advertisements. It will have to face a difficult year with lower obligatory shares of investments on audiovisuals and cinema. This would also have a detrimental impact on its activity. So I have to repeat what President Rutelli has already said. The Italian government should guarantee RAI the compulsory fee citizens pay in their electricity bill. Renouncing this additional income would have detrimental consequences on cinema and the audiovisual industry in general. So we require the additional income to be granted to RAI so that this amount of money, 140 million euros each year, can be allocated for cinema and the audiovisual sector. If MIBACT and the Ministry for Culture can maintain their promises, we hope the sector will manage to recover from this terrible crisis. This is my wish for the sector. Thank you, Mr. Leone. Thank you, Mr. Rutelli. We started last year this trilateral meeting at the margin of Focus on China, together with the president of MPA. Its president, Charles Lifting, started his journey in Europe from Venice. And we have the president for the person in Stan, who is the person in charge of MPA Europe, Cristina Morgia. I want to thank Cristina Morgia as well for her commitment during the month of August, Diana Tocci, Asia Ruperto, who have made this meeting possible, connecting from all over the world. Stan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Let me say what an honor it is for the Motion Picture Association and on behalf of all the members of the Motion Picture Association to be here in Venice and present among leaders of the Italian industry and government, the two undersecretaries who spoke earlier, their very impressive support for the audiovisual sector. We're very much happy to be part of this international collaboration, bringing together China, the United States, and Italy. In our panel today, we will talk about two two main themes, and before introducing those themes, I think I would just invite those panelists who are here present in the room to come up and join us, and then I'll introduce our introductory speaker. So here in the room with us today, we have Chiara Sbargia, who is the Director General of APA and President of APA Service. We have Simona Martorelli, the Director of International Relations and European Affairs at RAI. And we have Yoli Giannatosio, the Coordinator of the Research Unit within the MIBACT Directorate General for Cinema. So thank you to all of you for being here in the room and online. We have Yasmin Batista, the head of e-commerce sector for the DG Connect of the European Commission. Also Marco Chiemens, the co-CEO of Catellia and Italian delegate to the European Producers Club. We have Carolina Lorenzona, the Executive Director and Director of Legal Affairs at Mediaset. We have Liu Chun, the President of China Film Co-Production Corporation. And we have Jay Rowe, Senior Vice President, West Coast Productions at HBO. And to introduce the lively discussion between these representatives of industry and government, we are honored to have with us today a man who will play an essential part in the future of digital services policy in the European Union. His name is Iván García del Blanco, MEP, the Vice Chair of the Jury Committee of the European Parliament, a critical committee in shaping the future of regulation of online services. Our panel today will look at two themes. These are policy and business. Both of these themes were well entrained before the pandemic. Already on the policy side, the Commission announced its intention to move forward with the Digital Services Act. And on the business side, we were undergoing remarkable changes. Already before the pandemic, and the thread running through all of our discussion today will be how policy and business are continuing and in some cases changing in response to the pandemic. So without further ado, I would like to invite MEP Iván García del Blanco to take the floor and introduce to us the topic of new frontiers for film business, what changes after the lockdown, confronting models and strategies.
Thank you very much. Thank you to MPA and the ANICA and the Italian Ministry of Culture about their invitation. I'm thrilled and even honored to participate in this conference at this Venice International Film Festival. I'm even more pleased to be here with you to witness that not even the pandemic stops the festival from occurring. But I also admit that I hope that we can all meet at Lido next year, like another participant told before me. At Venice International Film Festival was the first film festival in the world. Undoubtedly, it is the most fashionable film festival worldwide. And as a festival, its existence is essential to disseminate European works among the audiences locally, nationwide, across Europe and worldwide. Festivals like this one have been key to anchor the identity of European culture. The historian and writer Orlando Figes reckons, I had the chance to read him yesterday, that among the key elements that established the foundation of a pan-European culture at the end of the 19th century, together with the braille and cheap and massive printing, was the international diffusion of intellectual property rights with the Berne Convention from the protection of literary and artistic works. I could not agree more with Figes. In 1945, the European project was based on democratic values and the consolidation of peace, and it was also based on an European cultural spirit linked to the understanding of a common European cultural legacy, from its historical side to its greatest artists and creators. Today, like then, Europe has to reinforce its cultural identity to get by the global world, and it should do it by promoting its values and principles in all the challenging areas that confront us, like democracy and disinformation, climate change, the protection of migrants and minorities, gender equality. Also, authors and creators should be taken care of by protecting their intellectual property rights in the new scenarios that provide the technological advances. The lockdown has had and has many side effects, and the cultural sectors as a whole has been and is one of the most affected by it. Within the audiovisual sector, only the cancellation of productions and the closure of theaters and cinemas made us realize about the importance of the culture sector to the economy, the jobs it provides, and the contribution it makes to small businesses and the wider creative community. Yet, for many of us, the lockdown has also been an opportunity to fall in love again with cinema. Films have been one of our few ways to escape the consequences that the reclusion has brought to us. The confinement has crystallized how important cinema is for our well-being, for our economies, and for our culture. With lockdown restriction now easing, hope so, at least, it is time for us as legislators to be listening to the sector grasp how we can support its relaunch and provide the best legislative environment for the future. As the European Parliament requested, the recovery plan, someone has told about this, approved by the European Council in July, has recognized the creative and cultural sector as one of the main affected sectors by COVID-19, and as such, they are recipients of funding. This is a huge step in the recognition of the relevance of the European creative and cultural sector. However, legislators know that it is not enough. The Parliament keeps up the fight to double the funds allocated to the Creative Europe program in the negotiations of the multi-annual financial framework, as we believe this program has a pivotal role in the recovery process by strengthening the support of the European key players. In my view, the path to recovery lies in the reinforcement of the cornerstones of the European audiovisual creation, both at national and EU level, through all leverages and necessary means: authorship and artistic freedom, co-productions, promotion of European works, and regulations providing a level playing field for the entire ecosystem. For EU legislators, the digital policy is one of the main items of the agenda for the coming year, and we have to ensure that any legislative initiatives strengthen the cultural and creative sectors. And going direct to the geo-blocking issue, copyright and territorial exclusivity are the two founding principles for creativity, for ensuring the economic sustainability of the audiovisual sectors in Europe. In my capacity as a legislator at the European Parliament, I have witnessed with dismay certain statements by both the Commission and some of my fellow colleagues that revealed there is room for them to expand their knowledge about the geo-blocking. It is time for all of us to understand that narrowing the scope of the geo-blocking regulation would not translate into enhanced access to audiovisual and other cultural works protected by copyright. To the contrary, it would reduce content creation, production, and access to diverse offerings for European consumers, and it would have an adverse effect on prices and cultural diversity. Therefore, I urge my fellow EU decision makers to be cautious when we're calling for initiatives that may jeopardize the already fragile Europe cultural ecosystem, which has been particularly hit by the COVID-19 crisis. In fact, I had the chance to do so as a bunch of weeks ago at the petition, within the petition committee. We had a certain quarrel about this issue. About the Digital Service Act and the reform we are facing on. With the GDPR and the Copyright Directive, we have attested that Europe is a world leader in digital policy. The Digital Service Act is an opportunity for Europe to prove so again, but we need to get it right. Current e-commerce rules date back to the year 2000, and they urgently need an update. It's no way in other way. We have to ensure that during the legislative process, the original goal to the Commission to upgrade the liability of online platforms is not lost along the way. We need a level playing field for the platform economy and the offline economy, based on the same rights and obligation for all actors. Our work should focus on creating an environment where what is illegal offline is also illegal online. The foundations of the model are already there. The e-commerce directive provides a right framework. We have to ensure the safeguards of the main principles, as the ban on a general monitoring obligation of the content. In many cases, these principles just need an enhanced enforcement to work properly, as with the information requirements, which too often allow fraudulent organizations to hide online. Now we are going to listen to our colleagues from US and Asia, and we will learn a lot from them on how to cope with the effects of the lockdown and with the promotion of their own audiovisual production. Let me finalize this statement with the wish that any revision of the e-commerce directive through the Digital Services Act gives special attention to the European culture and creative sector, a sector which plays an essential role in sustaining social cohesion and cultural diversity in Europe. European creation will overcome the ongoing crisis, I'm sure of this, because it must prevail what makes our cultural and creative sector unique. Its uniqueness comes from the geographically and culturally diverse nature of its creation, while it promotes social cohesion and a strong sense of community and the sharing of a European way of life. That is the true European way of life. The continuity of the European project, its cultural legacy and its cultural identity depends on this spirit of pan-European culture that authors and creators build and share with us. It is our duty as legislators to protect it. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward the rest of the debate interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, MEP Garcia del Blanco, for that tour of the stakes for the audiovisual sector. One of the things you did in your remarks was remind us of the intention on the part of the European Commission to upgrade the liability regime. We've also been reminded of the will to have more stringent rules for online responsibility. I think now it's a good time to already bring the European Commission into the discussion, expand our institutional perspectives, and invite Yasmin Batista from DG Connect to share with us your outline of what the Digital Services Act will do, what parts of it may be relevant to what you're hearing from the audiovisual sector, and what you think the European Commission will ultimately propose. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti a Venezia. With you today, even if only online, and talk to you about the Digital Services Act. Indeed, we are busy right now with preparing this initiative, which should be published at the end of the year, and we are listening carefully to the more than 1,000 contributions we have already received, and the closing will be tomorrow. So we look forward to receiving the last ones in order to have a proposal which is solid, that takes into account all aspects of the industry. Of course, as a context, the Digital Services Act package is a priority for the Commission and the President, and an important building block also in the post-COVID-19 recovery period. The political guidelines to the current Commission announced a new Digital Services Act to upgrade basically our liability and safety rules for the digital platform services and products and complete the digital single market. Of course, for us, the robust single market is particularly important in the medium-term recovery strategy for the European digital economy confronted with the crisis. The post-crisis recovery will require, actually, I think, a strong and pro-innovation internal market with clearer, uniform and up-to-date rules for digital services. What I think it's specifically important for the audiovisual and the sector you're interested in is, of course, that it will, I think, create and improve some of the rules we already have. We have listened carefully to what the industry thinks, and we hear the wish to not change some of the balances that were in the previous e-commerce directive. I think, of course, while the Digital Services Act will try to address also imbalances in the commercial relationships between media publishers, audiovisual producers, and digital platforms in general, it is important to stress that they will only provide, of course, solution to some of the concerns that the sector is facing, but that it is not the only initiative of the Commission and that it should have to be seen in the overall context for this. It's so therefore a puzzle of this overall regulatory toolbox, and in relation to publishing and other aspects relating to the cinema and so, I think it is important also to put it into a perspective of the implementation of the copyright directive and the press publishers' right that is introduced there. And especially, I mean, already Article 15 of the new copyright directive provides press publishers with a new right to authorize and prohibit the online sales of their press publications by platforms. So there are already rules which are specific for the sectors, and we are right now framing how to change this. So basically, what is in this Digital Services Act, which I think is very important for the sector, is that, of course, with this act, our overall goal is to update the EU legislative framework to the today reality and to the platform business model. So, of course, part of our initiative will be very much with the scope on platforms who have also gatekeeper function. We'll see later on that. So we have basically two legs. One leg of the proposal that will deal with the e-commerce directive revision, let's say, and should clarify some rules like the scope, the responsibility of the online platforms, and make sure that they are appropriately supervised by authorities. And basically, online platforms should be asked to put in place certain due diligence measures, from notice and actions procedures to transparency requirements as their moderation policies. I hear what the industry is saying also concerning really we should not go beyond, we should keep in the articles of the principles of the e-commerce directive, but foster a way of being more proactive and also contributing more to the fight of illegal content, of course. So it's important to establish a clear, fast framework for cooperation between the member states and the better cooperation between online platforms and national authorities. So basically here, you know, your business customer policies. Of course, important also greater oversight and accountability on content policies, which is also relevant for the sector, and of prohibition, keep the prohibition of general monitoring obligations and they preserve the country of origin principle, as that is basically sustaining our current liability regime. The second leg is more on ex-ante rules, which should be covering large digital platforms acting as gatekeepers. And here, in reality, we're talking about a more limited scope, a targeted thing about 20 worldwide, let's say, companies that are very active in this, and that are here we are envisaging a mix of blacklist and whitelist ex-ante rules that could basically regulate the ex-ante behavior of these platforms, focusing on certain key issues which can be determined, such as avoiding user lock-in through interoperability and data portability measures, or addressing self-preferencing concerns. Also, we try to provide a regulatory system which allows for swift case-by-case assessment of the anti-competitive behavior. And here we are working very closely, of course, with our colleagues of DG And these both measures should be accompanied, of course, by an effective oversight so that the rules can be also enforced. And so we hope that although this second leg has a scope which is far more limited, it will of course have a lot of benefit for everyone who's using these gatekeeper platforms, and therefore all the SMEs and all the companies in your sector. I think on the DSA I would stop here.
Thank you. That's already very helpful. Yasmin, if you'll permit me, can I bring in some of the industry voices now and maybe begin with Marco Kiemens from Catelia. And Marco, what would help maybe, so we've heard a perspective now from two institutions, two of the European co-legislators, but what can you tell them and tell the rest of us about the trends that are affecting the industry right now that they need to be aware of, and how those trends are being influenced by the current public health crisis?
Thank you, Stan. Well, buongiorno a tutti. First off, thank you for having me as a panelist. Even if I'm not physically there, I'm from my office in Rome. Well, I think that the regulators and all my colleagues here, you all know very well how the lockdown and even the post-lockdown has tremendously accelerated certain trends. Maybe hasn't created those trends, but certainly has accelerated in an unbelievable manner. A number of hours spent in front of TV or tablets or anyway watching audiovisual content has been unbelievable. The number of subscriptions for the streamers around the world. Let's not forget that if we had to rely on the numbers that Disney had initially given, they were supposed to hit the target in between 60 and 90 million of subscribers worldwide by 2024. And I think they've done it now already. They're close to 60. Scripted TV producers, but now also film producers are increasingly more reliant on the streamers for them to commission us projects or buy them. At the same time, the Facebook, the Google, to a certain extent, the Amazon of this world and the advertising market have become even more powerful, imperiling the certain balance with the more traditional, they're now called legacy, I don't know exactly why, but the more traditional broadcasters. So obviously there are a number of issues here at stake. There is I could summarize them in two. I'm not going to speak about the first one, which is, I think maybe Carolina Lorenzon, I hope she'll talk about it, the level playing field between the traditional operators in Europe and the new entities, especially as far as spreading of using information, news, and collecting advertising is concerned. But my company is a production company, and so I'll speak about the major set of issues for us producers, which is the issues of our relationship with these new entities that are becoming more and more central in Europe. In the world and in Europe, in our lives. The world, as far as we are concerned, is a better place because they are coming and they are commissioning and buying our product. At the same time, there are risks, and I think we should focus also on these risks. Why? Because I think that when we hear very often operators of industry, or very often politicians that are not so much part of the industry debate, talking about creating a European champion, creating a European Netflix. I want to humbly remind everybody that in Europe, there isn't any such thing as a powerful streaming international entity for audiovisual content. There is one for music content, Spotify, but that's it. And creating one that could potentially compete with companies that are capitalized 1 year 1 trillion and 3 years later 2 trillions or 1.5 trillion is unthinkable. So I think that we shouldn't really focus our energies in pursuing an unbelievable industrial dream of creating that level of competition. Maybe I'm narrow-minded, but this is my opinion. And we should look at what we have. And what we have in Europe is an extreme, unbelievable wealth of talent, creators, producers that they are so much part of the cultural life of this continent. And they embody the possibility for Europe to project certain values with their commercial product, with their more art house, let's call it, or sophisticated product. They, we allow for European values and for cultural diversity to actually exist. So now, what should be done, in our opinion, to preserve that? Certainly two things in line of principle. One is to give economic support when it's necessary. And in this context, I want to say, despite the tradition of us Italian citizens always to lambast and criticize the government, as far as we're concerned, got it right, got it quick and got it right by simply increasing the tax credit for audiovisual production. It basically created something that instead of a complicated set of guarantee and insurance policy and stuff, that kind of satisfied the industry and made the industry move forward with this relative degree of certainty, of economic certainty. But the other thing I think that is very important, and possibly this is a game that needs to be played at a European level, is provide a certain set of rules if necessary. If certain rules cannot be agreed on industrial pact with the streamers, which is something that we hope for. But if that is not possible, then set certain rules, and rules that do not simply dictate investment quotas, but dictate something which is more profound, which is a charter of rules of how not just the legacy, the traditional operators, they're already doing it, they've done it for years, for decades in some cases, but the new ones, how they should interact with the independent production world. Well, how they should treat them in a way that are not relegated to services. It's just as simple, the simple fact of working with them, but working in a way they are assured that a certain level of remuneration that allow them to invest in project and propel the growth of the industrial industry.
Thank you.
Sorry, in your cultural industry.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Marco. Can I jump in at that point and just say, I think that's the perfect lead-in to ask one of our other panelists, Chiara Spargia from APA, representing a producer interest. What is at stake in the setting of these rules from your perspective? What is there to gain, and what are your fears about ways that regulatory intervention could go wrong?
First of all, it is perfect for me to speak after Marco Kivens because our contributions are connected with one another. I represent the audiovisual producers, and what is at stake is the future of the companies in this sector. Let us provide some figures recently published by a study by FAPAV telling us that the lockdown caused by COVID-19 has more than tripled acts of individual piracy, and that online piracy has increased by 66% in this period in Italy. So production companies respecting intellectual property and other rights and patents are the main key to protect creativity, employment, and the remuneration of the companies. They are the condition without which a unique single market, digital single markets would not exist. So unless this act does not guarantee the rights against platforms, we shall lose the opportunity for the whole production chain to develop in a harmonious way, not only for independent producers. One of the basic principles, besides contrast, the fight against piracy, is promoting transparency of data online. This lack of transparency is a source of problems for the owner of the rights, and the European Commission has not so far effectively faced this problem with the previous directives, and has led many independent production companies, small, medium, large-sized, in a position of serious asymmetry, lack of symmetry as against the streamers who manage information and have difficulties in providing visibility to the stakeholders. Data transparency is a fight of our association since the very beginning, 1994, and it still continues. National broadcasters for 30 years now are obliged to provide thorough reports on investments, on the works that they broadcast, on the quotas reserved for independent producers. So our request should be received by the over-the-tops. Data about consumption can be compared to those referring to TV consumption in order to provide independent audiovisual producers if data about the number of viewers, the possibility to better connect with the online public that is increasingly important at global level. The independent producer, and it has always been doing so since tax credit was developed in Italy, might decide to invest in new productions, negotiating contracts in a more consistent way. For the time being, we do not have this data, and we really hope that the European regulators will play their crucial role in the future, starting from the Digital Service Act. Our commitment to creating a dialogue with European regulators, Italian regulators, the different commissions, has developed to include considering the on-demand fruition of the contents. Our role will be that of studying new management models that might create a dialogue with the new tools offered by innovation. We think that as producers, we must invest in the use of new technologies and new tools of the digital technology, including the blockchain applications. We want to give our contribution to information management, not only to protect the owners of the rights, but also, going back to the start, to identify possible violation of the rights to use these works.
I didn't fail to notice that Yasmin in her discussion of what the Commission is thinking about alluded to piracy and know your business customer rules, which could contribute to fighting it. So that's it's good to see there might be something there that could help us with that struggle. I want to bring the broadcaster perspective into the discussion now. We're privileged to have representatives of leading Italian commercial and public broadcasters here with us today. So I will start maybe with Carolina Lorenzona, at Mediaset. And Carolina, you know, one of the things that resonates with many of us in the media sector, in the audiovisual sector about this debate on online responsibility is the fact that, of course, you know, producers and media companies already take responsibility for the content that they put out there in the marketplace. They operate with, in fact, in some cases, quite strict editorial responsibility rules, while some other digital and social media services don't. How do you see that as a factor in the debate over the Digital Services Act?
Thank you, Stan, and buon pomeriggio a tutti e desidero innanzitutto ringraziare i due sottosegretari.
Thank you, Stan. First of all, I would like to thank our vice secretaries, Enrico, who has mentioned one of our most important productions, Perfect Strangers.
That's our role. We'd like to keep it that way. We've been pretty good thus far at scouting national, local talent, and Sottosegretario Enrico was making reference to local productions, and thus far we had sort of, I would say, since after the war, but especially after the European Broadcasting Directive in '89, there was a perfect system cooperating on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, something, as Marco said before, doesn't work any longer, and we should fix it, and pretty fast if you want to be able to continue to do what we've been doing so far, you know, scouting Sorrentino and Genovese and you name it. As broadcasters and media company, we, both public and private, on both sides of the Atlantic, have made responsibility a pivotal driver of our operations. Internet has enabled fantastic opportunities, but dodgy services have proliferated with the phenomenon of what we call permissionless innovation. As publishers and content producers, we are responsible not merely vis-a-vis our viewers and especially towards minors, but we are also a trusted partner for the whole value chain, guaranteeing intellectual property protection and remuneration upstream, quality, transparency, and a fair return on investment to advertising clients downstream. The new attention brokers, social media and video sharing platforms, whose competition we face in the two-sided market for audience and advertising, have been operating for almost 2 decades now with no rules whatsoever, neither on the quality of the content nor on the overall amount of advertising that can be catered on their platforms. Needless to say, with no investment in the licensing of professional content uploaded by quote-unquote unaware users. It is our hope that that the liability, that the DSA will clarify once and for all the liability and the regulatory regime that should apply to all tech platforms whose business model rely on the distribution of audiovisual content, not only. And that for far too long has prospered over an ill-conceived extension of the liability exemption in the e-commerce directive. As you know well, Stan, the European Court of Justice and national courts have both ascertained that the limited liability regime in the e-commerce directive shall not be applied to tech platforms which play an active role in organizing, optimizing, and monetizing via programmatic advertising auctions and sales content uploaded by their users. And we all know by now that tech platforms such as YouTube hoover up users' data in order to enhance their advertising offer. This behavior is for sure no passive role. The ongoing, as also the co-legislator made reference to the ongoing unjustified asymmetries that have facilitated illegal distribution and unfairly and adversely affected the very players who continue to abide by an extremely prescriptive regime, i.e. the legacy players, as Marco called the good old broadcasters. We, of course, welcome the Know Your Business customer protocols that will foster more accountability, transparency, and the much sought-after level playing field. What is at stake here is not merely Europe's digital sovereignty, but also cultural diversity, pluralism, and independence of media outlets. At this stage, we believe that the DSA will not be enough to bring back competition and fairness. It's way too late. It's a bit too late. The entrenched dominant positions of systemic gatekeeping platforms have severely affected the sustainability of their competitors, which have no choice but to rely on them for content distribution, access to data, and programmatic advertising sales. This is why we believe that Vice President Vestager's initiative for a new competition tool should also complement the DSA and provide the EC with all the necessary instruments to prevent the leveraging of dominant positions, which will further consolidate the market power of systemic platforms, systemic tech platforms.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolina. That's very helpful, and I wonder if we can now bring in the public broadcaster perspective via Simona Martorelli to complement the views of your colleagues on the commercial side.
Thank you very much also for inviting and express another perspective. Definitely, first of all, to Ryan, to other public service media in Europe within the European Broadcasting Union, the adoption of meaningful rules for global online platforms is absolutely essential in the light, of course, of the global online platforms' active role that they play, and also on how and whether citizens can have access to content and information on live, which obviously has an impact on opinion making, free speech, and ultimately on democracy. We would like to share with you 4 regulatory solutions that we have discussed and approved within the European Broadcasting Union, and of course with RISE support as well. Firstly, as has been mentioned, we absolutely agree also with the commercial television to increase platform responsibility to secure the public trust in media and user safety. Because what happens is that online platforms frequently take down services and content that are provided by media providers, and despite being legal and under EU and or national law without prior notice and information. But when content and services are already under regulation and oversight, when the media providers offer them on the third-party platforms, then platform operators should really have a sort of a positive obligation to respect the integrity of these contents and also editorial freedom. Therefore, we think that the DSA package should really have obligations on to impose obligation on online platforms not to subject these services to any secondary control or interferences. Secondly, ensuring prominence of general interest content and also establish rules on content attribution. Of course, we want all citizens to have access to a broader range of services, but in particular, the ones important for democratic, cultural and social needs in European societies. Therefore, specific rules to support prominence of general interest contents, but alongside, of course, specific obligations also with respect to leave intact the branding and the logos from media, and correct content attribution is absolutely important, and it will definitely increase the exposure to diversity and promote, of course, media pluralism. Thirdly, increase the responsibility of platforms to act against illegal and harmful content. We have just said, all of us know that citizens are still clearly exposed to illegal practices, so measures are absolutely still insufficient. Chiara was mentioning, in particular during the COVID-19 piracy raised. And for example, I have to say public service media made an enormous effort during COVID-19 to give trustworthy information to audiences. And in RAI, we also created and established a task force on fake news, in particular because there was so much disinformation during COVID-19. Therefore, we think that the DSA should really outline clearer obligations to enhance online platforms' accountability, including efficient and effective notice and action mechanism, effective complaints mechanism, and enhanced transparency rules about content moderation and curation, and of course about business customers. We all recognize the value of automated tools, fine, but to avoid also the risk to over-remove content, it is very important that these automated tools need to be combined with human oversight, and if necessary, to apply administrative sanctions in case of non-compliance if these mechanisms are not applied effectively. Fourthly and lastly, to improve algorithm transparency and accountability, because platform algorithm recommendation systems often attribute preferences, self-referencing to their own services or services from partners, and the citizens have a lack of transparency. They don't have the tools to empower them to make the right decisions. It is no more really tenable to leave it solely up to major online platforms to decide whether and how content is found and shared, how it is ranked, and to decide what constitutes a fair online business space using unilateral terms and conditions and with a take it or leave it approach. This has far-reaching consequences on the freedom of expression. These obligations, we think they need to be applied to all platforms, small, big, active, passive. We need a notion of gatekeeping rules that is absolutely flexible, because gatekeeping can occur regardless of these parameters, and they have, of course, a significant impact in any case. And also, the DSA should cover non-European providers who offer digital services to users in the European Union, so they should not be excluded, of course. And also that the media need to have access to the data that derive or related from the platforms, from the content that are on third-party platforms. We absolutely need this, because this would also, without such access, public services are restricted in their ability to innovate themselves and what they can offer to better target their audiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simona. Really, and I think you've really rounded out the discussion for us on the European regulatory environment, and we'll give you the last word on the Digital Services Act for the moment, and pivot now towards the next three panelists who are really going to speak to the theme of returning to work and the challenges of doing business in the pandemic and post-pandemic environment. And I think we're honored today to have Liu Chen, the president of the China Film Co-Production Corporation, to talk with us about how the Chinese industry is adapting to the vast challenges of the post-COVID environment, and any lessons that you may have for us about the return to production and return to cinemas.
Thank you, Stan. Do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. From the previous speakers, I noticed that TSA is a very big concern in the European community and the industries. So I think my colleagues in the Chinese film community needs to get some more information about this, because this is it seems this is very important in the European film community. Before going to answering your questions, I just wonder if you have some idea of the two most important periods in China for box office. First, it's the Chinese New Year, and the second is the National Day period. Usually, the Chinese New Year will start from mid-January to mid-February. It varies because of the lunar calendar. But the last Chinese New Year period was a disaster for the film industry. On January 23rd, 2 days before the Chinese New Year, all cinemas were shut down because of the pandemic. And from not until early June, there seemed to be a recovery of the situation of the pandemic, but in early June, there was a small run of COVID-19 in Beijing, only in Beijing. So there was about 1 month break for recovery or reopening of the cinemas in China. So from January 23rd till July 20th, all cinemas in China were closed. And from July 20th, even the cinemas were reopened. They were asked to sell tickets not up to 30% of the seats. And from August 14th on, the tickets sold, the rates of tickets sold were raised up to 50%. In last week, most cinemas in China are selling tickets with the maximum of 70%. So last Chinese New Year was a disaster for the industry. I have a few figures. For the first 8 months, as far as box office is concerned, in China there were $815 million box office, which is 13% of 2019. And for domestic films, it's about 18.6% of 2019. And for imported films, it was only 6.2% of that same period of 2019, which is a great hurt to the industry. And for new films released for the first 8 months in 2008, in total there were 81, with 59 locals and 23 international films. So during this COVID-19 period, the cinema industry in China was greatly hurt. And both the central government and the local provincial governments attached very strict policies in the fighting and control of the COVID situation. At the same time, the industry were trying their best, including the central government and the local governments, and as well as the local, as well as the industry, were trying their best to do something. For example, there are tax cuts and financial support from both central government and the local provincial governments to give support to the industry. Some goes to script development, some goes to production, some goes to release, distribution and exhibition, some goes to services in backlots, and some others goes to post-production. And by the way, only from early July, film production in China was reopened throughout the country.
Can I
Yeah.
can I ask in that context, and given our limited time here, what would you see out of that experience and China's response to it? What would you see as the critical lesson that maybe we can still learn from in other parts of the world?
Okay, so we have four fields that maybe we can share with our international colleagues. The first is since the Chinese people love traveling a lot, so ever since the beginning of the pandemic, both the central government and provincial governments had very strict regulations on on traveling of the inhabitants, and also for all industries. So most industry reopened only until the situation is less serious, very much less serious. And the second is during the pandemic, most film production companies they spent more time and energy focusing on doing something to make their film script better, to moderate their film script in case once the production are allowed to reopen. And third is because of the pandemic, some new films, local films, they tried to get their films released online, which is quite new for local blockbusters. And last is most cinemas would use this period of the pandemic to improve the quality of their facilities in the cinemas, like ventilation and sanitizing for the entire cinemas. I think all we have done is try to give our audience a more secure cinema-going environment.
Indeed.
I think that's all.
Yeah, indeed, that sense of security of the audience in the cinema is something we're seeing on display here in Venice as well during the screenings. The measures very carefully enforced here in the screenings down the street. Thank you very much for that contribution, and can I take this opportunity to pass the floor to Jay Rowe from HBO and ask, Jay, you've got an Italian series, My Brilliant Friend, that is returning to production here in Italy in the coming weeks. As you think about that production and your other international productions, what are the considerations that are foremost in your mind, the preoccupations that are most on your mind that will shape HBO's work on returning to production?
Thank you, Stan, and thank you for inviting me today to be part of the Venice Film Festival. I think it's wonderful that the film festival is taking place, as has been stated. I think it's a wonderful symbolic gesture. Thank you for the ministers and Stan and the MPA. Working with you through all of this has been incredibly helpful, and you've been an amazing partner helping us get back into production. And yes, Italy, we are very, very excited to be able to, as it is a co-production with RAI, to have My Brilliant Friend come back online. And it will be one of the first larger scale productions that will be in production this fall. We love shooting in Italy. The tax credit there, I always, when I have an opportunity, I want to say thank you for the tax credit. That's so important and so significant to all of you there. It makes a big impact on us. And I think in this environment, it's a very, very important thing to keep in mind. In terms of getting back to production, I think what has been significant, and I think some of the other speakers have spoken to this, is over the last 6 months, what has happened. And I think when we first literally shut down, everybody said, let's be safe, let's be careful. Very quickly, however, the issue of content and the need for content, right? All of a sudden, everybody is sitting at home and they're watching more content. And so what ended up almost flipping it on its head, as much as we have a lot in the pipeline, was, well, what do you have coming up? And all of a sudden, we were then being pressured. When can you back? When can you come back? When can you come back? That in combination with people actually needing to come back to work, right? This has impacted every single person that's here today economically, and we've heard many, many figures. People want to come back to work. So what has been our focus? And literally from March 12th on, every day for the last 6 months for us in our production unit is, how do we get people back to work? And so number one, it's creating a safe work environment. And so we have spent hours and days talking about this, monitoring situations around the world, in particular in China and some of the places where production has been coming back, as to how to create for the cast and crew a safe physical environment, and secondly, a safe, almost, and I say psychological environment because of the stress. We're all feeling stress. So how do you create a work environment where people can come back to work and feel safe and be able to focus, right? So we have spent, many, many days, papers. I think many of you have read about the different papers around the world, the white paper here in Los Angeles, the paper put up by the unions. We have our own 40 to 50 page document ourselves at HBO. Every studio has come up with that. And these protocols, which are very interesting as you read through them, and we've done them in conjunction with health officials. We have been told the protocols that we're setting for our industry are as high, if not even higher, than in some of the hospitals where COVID cases are taking place, because of the sensitivity of creating an environment where people can feel safe. What happens as a result of that? We have to put a lot more money to our budget. So we've spent many, many days, and the idea of setting up a testing protocol, proper PPE gear, setting up a management team inside of each production. We have a COVID managed team right now in every production, usually somewhere between 3 to 10 people, whose entire job is to manage the COVID protocols around the production. And we are seeing that in productions all around the world. And lastly, and I say this in significance because of actually speaking with all of you in Italy today, and also because of our role with the MPA, working with local authorities, I can't emphasize how important this has been to us getting back into production, because every country has a different structure, every city and state and so on, province, as you may want to call it, working closely with the government and the health officials to make sure that as our business, and I think of each production as its own business, that our production is safe. And there are different ways of testing. There's different ways of monitoring things from a business standpoint. And so we've spent an inordinate, not inordinate, but a lot of time working with government officials, health officials, et cetera, to create the structure that allows us to come back into production. And that being said, this is ongoing. Every day things are happening, weekly things are changing. Cases are going up, cases are going down. We're so happy to see the way the cases have dropped off in Italy, and I hope it stays that way. But it's an ongoing process on a weekly basis. The MPA has been wonderful in terms of monitoring this around the world. We get an update every week, literally of every country around the world and what is happening so that we can monitor this. So it's an extraordinary time for us. It's an extraordinary time for the industry. Content has never been more desired. It's more competitive than ever. So what's interesting is that's creating a lot of pressure on us making productions to get back into production because it's such a competitive environment.
Absolutely.
But we appreciate everything that's been done with the MPA. We appreciate all of you in Italy. We look forward to working with some of the best filmmakers there. And good luck. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Jay. And that's a perfect introduction also to close the panel segment of our day with a local Italian official who's been very helpful in all of this, Yoli Giannatasio. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stan. Parlerò in italiano per poter usare questi pochi minuti in maniera...
I will speak in Italian to be able to use these last few minutes very synthetically to be able to quickly summarize. We are talking about the means to promote the ability of companies to overcome the emergency through three actions: unblocking the ordinary measures available, accelerate this to ensure the liquidity required by companies in this period of time, adaptation of the norms. This is even more important in order to be able to act in a targeted manner for the problems that have emerged from this emergency, and extraordinary measures, of course, with further resources that were not, if you like, earmarked from the beginning. Very briefly, between March and August 2020, through the ordinary measures implemented, we have unblocked 340 million euros between tax credits and other contributions that we generally accord. These were measures that were pending and the implementation of which was accelerated in order to guarantee the resources for the companies to continue to work. Another measure that was anticipated, this is purely normative, although it is essential to favor the opportunity for companies to access our contributions, although they don't have the conventional distribution channels, the assurance that cinematographical works that have preferential channels of support, they have a specific and dedicated funds, could maintain that status even if they were released on platforms or in other channels. Of course, all of this due to the closure of cinemas. This derogation allows them to resort to the funds that they can have available to access further aid. And this measure, this derogation, has lasted even beyond the closure of the cinemas that opened mid-June. The measure was implemented until 15th of July with further opportunities of further derogations. And one of the most important things, and this has been quoted by those who came before me, the extraordinary levels, especially on the tax credits, not only it is the most automatic tool with a certainty of the results, which has a 30% rate for the cinema and a different rate with facilitations for companies, for productions that were expected to be implemented between February and November. So we are rewarding those who are producing in this period, and at the same time we are supporting companies with additional costs, which have obviously been determined by the health protocols to guarantee safety on the set. In addition to this, all the other measures, including tax credits, are not revoked. Even if the production is irreversibly interrupted, the contributions will not be revoked. And from this point of view, we have somehow gone through the insurance system. Obviously, if the work was interrupted due to COVID, and then specific intervention lines with let's say, facilitations and advantages also for events such as festivals, and of course the cinemas, theatres that have an extraordinary contribution of 40 million euros, which are of course the parties which are being most affected by the closure.
To you on behalf of all your colleagues at MIBACT for the support that you've given to the audiovisual sector in Italy in this time of crisis, both to the local production and to the international production. It's deeply appreciated, and I want you and your colleagues at MIBACT to know that. I now have the privilege to introduce someone who is very important to the industry, also very important in my universe, since he's my ultimate boss. Charles Rivkin, the chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association. Charlie, last year we were all here together in Venice, and this year you're on the screen from Washington. Charlie, thank you for joining us. We look to you for some closing remarks to be the capstone to our discussion today. Oh, no audio at the moment, Charlie.
All right, technical difficulty. Can you hear me now?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Stan, for that introduction and for moderating such a terrific panel. And greetings and buongiorno to everybody in the room and online. And I want to congratulate Roberto Cicuto and Alberto Barbera and all the organizers and friends and participants and supporters who are helping to make this yet another successful festival. Francesco Rutelli, thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your leadership at ANICA, and especially in these challenging times. And of course, Roberto Stabile, without whom our virtual and in-person gathering today around the planet would not be possible. The world saw how well you adjusted to this new normal, if you will. There was jury president Kate Blanchett and festival director Barbera greeting each other with masks on and touching elbows. And you required face masks, temperature checks, social distancing. You took the steps to ensure that one of the globe's premier festivals could operate as best as possible under these extremely difficult circumstances. And those circumstances, I mentioned, of course, the COVID era, have been on everybody's mind. And how quickly we, as an industry, can get back to full production. And moving forward, I know we can all work together to accelerate the pace of production and do it responsibly, safely, and sustainably, as Jay mentioned a few moments ago. You know, we have to come back as an industry stronger, smarter, more unified in our purpose than ever before. And to do that, we have to start by ensuring that we protect the creativity that's the heartbeat of our industry. As the COVID era made clear, malicious actors abuse tools like social media and search engines to misinform, to disinform, to defraud consumers, which undermines legitimate commerce. And illegal websites now operate in the online equivalent of what I can only think of as the Wild West. And when my organization investigates these illegal sites, we also find that many of them set up their services in the European Union. and they're buying critical business services like web hosting and payment processing while concealing their identities. Disinformation, corruption, and criminality are threats to the health and well-being of our collective future, and they cannot be ignored. We have to fight those forces by insisting on strong rule of law and real responsibility in the online environment. And that's exactly why the stated goal of the European Commission's intended proposal for a new Digital Services Act is to lay down more stringent rules for the responsibilities of these digital services. Our industry has to work together to ensure that this overall goal of more stringent rules remains top of mind when considering all policy options, especially where the Commission considers updating and modernizing the e-commerce directive. But I have to say I'm increasingly concerned that some of the industries that have been part of the problem now seem to be asking for exactly the opposite: broader safe harbors, fewer responsibilities, less potential liability. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not more stringent. Our industry needs to be on guard against a weakening of these rules. And the same applies to copyright, the lifeblood of all business. That is why we look forward to Italy's successful and careful implementation of the DSM copyright directive in a way that preserves copyright. And the process is well on track, thanks in large part to Minister Franceschini, whose tireless work to safeguard and promote this great industry of ours is so much appreciated. And there's other factors to put into place to increase and encourage production as well. Tax credits is a major one. So is the streamlining of slow bureaucracy and very clear guidelines in terms of COVID proposals for incoming productions. And no one knows this better than Minister Franceschini. He's been a strong champion for an investor-friendly tax code, making this beautiful country with such rich and cultural heritage even more attractive to the people who make film and television worldwide. We thank him for that, as well as for his efforts to build strategies for sustainable growth based on the EU Green Deal. The stakes for our industry are high. Before COVID hit the world, global box office and home entertainment reached record highs with a global total of $42.2 billion. Theatrical box office and streaming combined crossed the $100 billion mark for the first time in history. Now, I know it's a high bar to return to, but there's already so many encouraging signs. And this is not just about the economic figures. It's also about the millions of men and women who work in our industry. According to the new research from Ernst & Young, there's more than 1 million people contributing directly to the development, production, and distribution of film and audiovisual content across Europe. And for every one of these people that are directly employed, there's one additional job created or maintained in the sector, representing another 1 million indirect jobs in the value chain. This is what's also at stake. So cautiously and with extensive health precautions, many of these people are returning to work. In Italy, for example, Sony Pictures Television's Leonardo was one of the first large-scale productions to resume production after the COVID crisis. And as you've discussed today, governments play a very important role in making this possible while protecting public health. Now, I remember when I was in Venice, as Stan was saying, when I was in Venice at the festival last year, I saw this installation called Building Bridges, and it was created, if I remember correctly, by Lorenzo Quinn. And it consisted of 6 pairs of hands arching 50 feet over a waterway in Venice's Castello district. They were there to symbolize unity. Well, I'm sure you will agree with me that right now, unity is something we all need, not just in our sector, but in our society at large. The unity to work together, to take the right and responsible steps to continue moving forward with eyes on a better future, hand in hand. And with that, I'll hand the virtual microphone back to Roberto. Thank you, and I look forward to being there with you in person next year.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for such terrific and very, very warm words. And we are waiting for you next year here in Venice, for sure, with Stan. And now is the moment to give the word to Nicola Borrelli in the countryside. Nicola Borrelli, Direttore Generale Cinema. Where are you, please? Nicola, tocca a te parlare dalla campagna.
Ci sono, mi sentite?
Can you hear me? Thank you, all the people who have decided to take part in this event, and especially those who were the organizers and who worked on this in order to ensure that we could be here today. We must necessarily thank them for the optimism, Barbera and Cicuto, especially for having wanted so deeply to organize this film festival. It hasn't yet finished, so we'll keep a low profile for the time being, but it really is a very important moment. It really is a step forward, and I think it helps us all in spirit, all of us who are involved in this industry. We're terribly late, so I'll try to be very brief in providing my conclusions. The pandemic has impacted a sector which was very dynamic before the pandemic, with acquisitions, mergers. That's had an important role, where global competition was very strong, with an enormous advantage for the spectators throughout the world, but with a number of elements that did deserve our attention. To give an answer to the pandemic, we have all tried to implement exceptional measures to allow the sector to minimize the damage. And at the same time, it is important to make the effort to imagine the future scenario when soon, and of course it's not going to be a few weeks, but hopefully very soon we will be back to normal. If we can imagine the two main issues that emerge from this crisis, or at least I see two issues, two aspects. For a start, the fact that we have all immediately tried to inject resources into the segment in order for it to restart as soon as the conditions are fully available to do so. Right now in Italy, production has resumed very forcefully, thanks to the effort that all the players have put into this. The government supports us through resources which have not yet physically arrived, but that will happen over the next few weeks. The operators themselves, who have actively participated in the drafting of a protocol to be able to start shooting. That's on the one side, but equally important are another two considerations that clearly and forcefully emerge from today's event. It is, however, associated with something that we had seen even before the pandemic, both at national and community level. It is important for for things in general to be updated to the situation in which we are living, and which is very different from what we had even 4 or 5 years ago. A great and increase of the responsibilities for platforms, based on the idea that different operators all try to attract the same spectators, means that they should have comparable conditions, avoiding the symmetries, the lack of symmetries that we have today. So we have to quickly update the regulatory framework. In Italy, for example, and this was mentioned by the Undersecretary Martella, we have to accept the Copyright Directive as soon as possible, as the directive, the setup directive, and all the other directives for this industry. In 2016, there had already been mention of the need for level rules for traditional and non-traditional operators. This has to be implemented now. The European Union has itself the framework that has been mentioned, the level playing field, the responsibility of the platforms. But the crucial element that emerges, and which is increasingly evident, is that all of this has to be done as soon as possible. It has to be done quickly. These rules must be effective, but they must be quick. If all the rules that we are talking about are implemented in 4 years' time, as some pessimists expect, then very probably those rules will no longer be effective. As a result, we must work very quickly. And I'm talking to the government, to the institutions, and to my European colleagues. We have to work quickly. We have to work swiftly. Time is of the essence. Time is as important as the content. A positive aspect which has emerged is that creative work is important for our public. It is not secondary. Some skeptics might have changed their minds in the meantime. We have overcome a terrible period also by the possibility and the opportunity to benefit and enjoy the contents supplied to us. Nevertheless, this means that all the operators in the chain of value has to bear in mind that the spectator is not an indistinct individual. We are spectators also of cinemas, not only of platforms, but what they expect of the two different types of watching cinema can indeed be very different. The new business models have to be increasingly shaped on the importance of capturing the attention of the spectators. And we can't simply live based on what's happened in the past. Competition will be healthy for the spectator, but at the same time, this will require change in lots of different parts of the value chain in this segment. There appears to be a light in the future. We seem to be moving forward, but the path will not be simple. It won't be short. It will require all of us to put in all our efforts in order to go back or continue the growth that has been interrupted this year due to the pandemic. The Italian government has concretely shown that it believes in this segment. The opportunity is there, and now it will be necessary to make available all the interventions, all the rules, all the tools required. And at the same time, we have to ask all operators to focus their strategies on a growth that bears in mind that the consumer is not an indistinct entity that you can feed anything, but you have to take into consideration the taste of those spectators and produce content that is suitable to their needs. And if you agree, I will stop here because we really are running late. Thank you, General Director. Thank you. We apologize with the Biennale for this, for the extra time that we have used, but I'm sure that we will be forgiven. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for Luciano who has stayed awake to listen to us. Director General Borrelli, everybody. Even if I haven't mentioned you, thank you, everybody. And next year, I hope to see you physically here, and we will keep within the times allocated. Thank you.